Thank you for having me. I think I got a little wigged out on the theme of suggestibility, and so I, combed through the book. And what is suggestible? What are the scenes that are suggestible? And in listening to everybody, I think it's a little more free-form than that, but I think you will find suggestible elements of this scene. And basically, just in a nutshell, the book is a story of seekers, a contemporary woman who is on a spiritual journey, and it's twinned with the story of her grandfather, who was a soldier in World War II and became extraordinarily cynical, seeing the horrors of war. And so we actually meet him in this sequence at his darkest moment. And he encounters a most unusual character that perhaps suggests to him in a very unorthodox way that there is perhaps another way to look at the world. So with that, and the last thing I would say is we meet him caught in the middle of a horde sequence of friendly fire. He's being hit, his platoon is being hit by friendly fire in the form of artillery. And lastly, I should say, this is a letter to his brother. Have you been on the receiving end of artillery strikes? Have you felt the unholy spasm of the ground beneath your feet, rolling and bucking like an animal trying to rid itself of a parasite? It forces itself up through you, that furious energy, as it passes in a split second from shell to earth to your body. Every bone from your ankles to the top of your head rattles. Your eyes and eardrums and lungs swell, as if they're trying to escape your body. And then it is through you, the worst sort of evil exiting the crown of your head, leaving you as horrified as you have ever been, spent like you have just been raped. Unintelligible things went through my head and came from my lips. The human being had been knocked out of me. I babbled and moaned. There was no division between thought and emotion. I experienced things only on one level, roiling colors and sensations, unbidden, unframed. For less than a split second, I had a strange flash of that thing I was before language, that baby in the crib that could put no dimension or sense to his experience, but could only experience it. I just remember that abject state. No word can be put to it. Terror is a weak, shallow strain of what I felt. Then, incredibly, I was underground. The honey-lit world above gave way to a darker radiance. I'd fallen. It was dark here, but there were walls, on all sides, and more than half a roof above. I could see the splintered timbers of what had once been a ceiling above, and the faint suggestion of the rest of a building rising above it. I was in a basement. But how to explain this basement? As I gathered myself, instinctively seeking out the nearest wall, pressing myself against it, I saw that there was a steel cot fixed into a wall beside me, that the basement had been subdivided into cells, and I was standing in one of them. It must have been a jail, and yet arranged throughout the place were some of the most beautiful Christian icons I'd ever seen. Wooden effigies of saints looked out at me from various cells. Chairs filled the spaces between, all facing a makeshift shrine, where a wooden Christ on a cross, some 10 feet high and undoubtedly moved from a much larger church, had been leaned into a corner. He cast his eyes down, as if ashamed to meet my gaze as the world above continued to destroy itself. A candle burned. An altar had been improvised from a small cart before that cross, upon which dozens of candles, all spent now, save for that single remaining flame, rested. Despite that roiling wave of hate above, the candle burned. Someone had been here sometime today. No doubt praying for the war to end, for the sons of this town to come home safely, for the town itself to be spared during these horrible spasming death throes of the war. Prayer is a wish cast into an unlistening infinitude, isn't it, brother? I would not move. I would sit here in this strange dark bunker and press myself to the wall and try to still the fear, try to regain control of my rationality. It was not to be. My nerves had been shattered in the way glass shatters. Shards were everywhere, and no matter how assiduous and exacting attempt was made at putting them back together, the vessel would never be made whole again. Words assembled themselves in my mouth. I had no say in their construct or intent. Other things had taken over. I was in some ways no more than a witness to myself. I talked to Christ, Christ that would not meet my gaze. I talked to Christ, Christ so ashamed by this world of men he had created. I talked to Christ, told him that yes, as soldiers we were damned for all the killing we did, but not as damned as the generals, because the generals actually had power power to choose, to marshal the most incredible forces the world had ever known, and they chose it for destruction. With power comes responsibility, right? The generals would burn, and the string pullers behind them, the politicians and corporate bosses would burn even more. But you know what, I said to Christ? You will burn the most, because you are the general of all generals, the King of Kings, divine creator that pulls all strings. And with power comes responsibility. This, that worldwide plague above, which the sun never sets on, is your responsibility. Christ said nothing, just sat behind those bars and stared at the ground. And yet another voice materialized through the din, raining down from above. The English was so polished that I initially thought it was one of my companymen, who had somehow found his way down to the basement. But it was a German minister. I recognized the clerical collar tucked beneath his overcoat. He stood unsteadily in the dark basement, separated from me by the bars. He'd apparently descended into the space within the last minute I hadn't noticed. It's only wood, he said. It took me a moment to realize he was referring to the effigy of Christ. He was strangely calm, this minister, despite the shelling above. In short order, I would realize he was drunk. Everyone these days was drunk. If you want to talk to someone who can actually listen. Listen and maybe respond, he said. He motioned to himself and sat down. Above, ordnance sought more flesh. I didn't take the bait, not initially. I remained pressed against the wall, a cornered animal, eyes on him, but ears on the unseen battle above. We just sat that way in the half-darkness, gauging each other. His eyes were prematurely baggy from booze, his hair matted as if he had not bathed in months. The only thing clean on him was that collar, its whiteness pure, indifferent to the overwhelming scheme of mud and dust and cordite around us. Talk to me, he said again. Fuck you, Fritz, I finally said. He looked at me with those bloodshot, haunted eyes. And if one of those shells hits us, those would be your last words, you know. Fuck you. He smiled a great painful smile. I tell you, I've heard many last words, but those two particular words are not a good culminating statement of a man's life. Well, maybe for mine it is. Ah, so your existence is so much more wretched than the rest of ours. No, we're all equally fucked. When they put us all in our collective grave, as this war is almost certainly to do, they should put up a single epitaph on that headstone. They were fucked from the outset. He smiled vaguely, felt in his pocket like he wanted a flash to be there, though it wasn't. And who would read it once we're gone? Can you believe this was happening, brother? The earth was eating itself alive around us, and we were just a couple of guys having a conversation. As I said, if it were not paid for in blood, war would be farce. He would read it, I said, despite myself, with a nod at Christ that would not meet our gaze. No, the minister said with an indifferent shrug, he's just a piece of wood. Wood doesn't read. I eyed him. You lose your face, minister? His eyes flickered inwardly at that, but he did not answer. What if we're not hit today? What if you walk out of this town with nothing more than that nosebleed you currently have? I instinctively wiped my nose, realized that blood was streaming from it, framing my mouth on both sides. I must have been a gare sight to him. I'd say we're still fucked. He eyed me in silence. The world continued to rage against itself above. Even if I walk out of here, and in fact walk out of Europe, I've seen the truth, I told him. War is not some interruption in an otherwise tranquil life. War is revelation. War is a window. And we see the bedrock, the true impulse of the world and God that has always been there and always will, hibernating between wars, looking for an outlet. It is the naked face of man. War is beneath everything, waiting for its moment. We are animals, not even that. We are worse. We are animals with a guilty conscience. Because who else could have dreamed up the devil but man? You have to have it in you to imagine it. Then by that logic, you'd have to have God in you too. God's made of wood, I said. He thought about that for some time. Then he said something that split through me, rendered the maelstrom above mute, if only for a second. Then why do you continue? It hung there between us. He dug into his pocket, said matter-of-factly, one can intellectualize all one wants, one can lay blame all one wants, but the truth is there are only two choices in life, live or die. From his pocket he withdrew a small pistol, a Walther. He laid it calmly on the floor between us. I carry it with me every day, he said, asking myself in the morning and the evening whether it was worth going on. Every day I ask, is there a point? And for some reason, I don't pull the trigger. There must be a point, even if I haven't a clue what it is. There must be some hope in my heart for something, even if I can't see clearly what it is. My soul, for some reason, wants to live, despite this. He nodded with some resignation upward toward the battle. He slid the pistol a little closer to me. I put it to you, he said, die or live. I considered that gun, how easy it would be to put it in my eye and squeeze the trigger. Shoot yourself, Mr. Fuck You, he challenged. I dithered. He smiled darkly. It's the ultimate question, isn't it? No equivocation is possible. If all is truly lost, you pull that trigger. If you don't, something has been said in that choice. I didn't take the gun, but still resisted his logic. Maybe it was just the fear that prevented me from taking it, pulling the trigger. I said as much. He shook his head in disagreement. Fear every time takes the easiest way out. I'm offering you the easy way out. I offer to us both. We sat there, two men in a dank cellar, communing as we eyed that pistol in the oblivion it promised. I recoiled enough, looked away enough for him to surmise I had made my choice. I could sense him nodding, as if to say, with the ultimate begrudging, me too. He then cast his glance down into his clasped hands. We still seek something, he said, and it is not a way out.